Good.
Thank you very much, Matt. Yes, it's not ideal weather conditions here on the Côte d'Azur, not quite the perfect sunshine and blue sky that we sometimes see, but I see that Ferrari fans have come in a variety of guises once again, and we always normally get a huge amount of Ferrari support here at Monaco. We're only just over the border from Italy. I wonder, John, if that support will be slightly different this weekend after what happened in Austria.
Well, Ben, I'm sure there'll be a little bit of a reaction from the crowds that are here on Thursday. No doubt there'll be some booing and some hissing. But really, once the action gets underway, that's what the fans have come here to watch. And right now is a mixture of damp and patches of dry. Tricky conditions for teams to go out for their first run here on Thursday morning, because it's so easy to make a mistake. Remember, the tyres are being warmed up under those tyre warmers and blankets, but the brakes are cold, and it takes a little bit of time to get the brakes up to temperature, because when they're in that intermediate stage, they are prone to snatch. And we can very easily lock a brake up, for example, downhill into the Mirabeau corner and just tag the wall, and all of a sudden you're out of that first session.
Well, the green light has come on at the end of the pit lane, and the first session does indeed get underway. And I have to say, I'm really looking forward to this weekend and our coverage here on F1 Digital Plus. Monaco always, as you see as we look down the hill from the Casino Square area, it is a unique track nowadays in Formula One. It is the only street circuit. The test of driving a Formula One car through these narrow streets is truly unbelievable. The sound is just amazing as it bounces off the high buildings around the track. It is a quite incredible experience, the Monaco Grand Prix, and I'm thoroughly looking forward to all our pictures on our interactive coverage this weekend. We'll be diving around all over the place, and we should be getting some pretty dramatic shots.
And just watching is Mark Webber and Alain McNish on their out lap. You can just see the damp patches. There's some bits, this is coming through the Portier corners down onto the seafront. They now dive into the tunnel, and here the track is pretty much, I think, in reasonable condition. But look inside the tunnel, there's still a bit of a sheen there from traffic that has gone through the tunnel earlier in the day, and there's still a residue of moisture on the road. And Mark Webber and Alain McNish very careful indeed as they come down into the braking area in the chicane, not to make a mistake. So easy, just even so simple as on an out lap like this, just to grab a brake. Coming down the Mirabeau into the Mirabeau corner, you could see where the trees overshadow the track. It also looked quite tricky, quite damp. Another part of the track where it's so easy to make an error and find yourself in trouble.
Well, we're just watching now coming through that swimming pool area. Alain McNish out on track there, as you say, with Mark Webber. Never has raced here before. Mark Webber has. In fact, he had a brilliant drive here last year in Formula 3000. He did all three. He took pole position, won the race, and took fastest lap. So superb effort in the Formula 3000 car, which is, of course, a very physical car to drive around here. He's now got the power steering fitted to the Minardi, and he's just done a very steady there acclimatisation lap just to make sure that everything's working okay, that the systems are up and running. And that's pretty much what everybody are doing. And John, these initial laps in the Formula 1 cars around this track, it takes a few laps, doesn't it, for the drivers to really get their eye in around here?
Well, first of all, it's an entirely different racetrack to anything that we've seen so far this year, or we're liable to see for the remainder of the year. You're on a real road circuit. These are the streets of Monte Carlo. They've been normal traffic has been running on this circuit up until Wednesday evening, and even in fact you'll see where the circuit will be opened up after practice sessions finish on Thursday, so it reverts back to a normal street, to a normal town. That of course results in all grime, road, muck, oil, whatever. They do wash the track every day though. It's one of the unusual features of this racetrack is they wash it every day. Nevertheless, it takes virtually the 3 days of running to get sufficient rubber down on the track to enable the rubber that teams will choose for the race to be able to survive. Tyres, for example, that may not look good on Thursday in a normal dry context will look stunning on Sunday. So teams are going to have to take a bit of a gamble today. They may not get through the amount of tyre work that they want to do, and both companies, Michelin and Bridgestone, will have brought with them probably their softest compound, and maybe also construction. Certainly Bridgestone have got new compounds and constructions here this weekend, so they will want to get into that programme as quickly as possible to find out information as quickly as possible. They know that of course the track will come to them, but the break-off point will be the end of Saturday morning, at which time they will have to decide what way to go with their tyres for qualifying and for the race. And here, of all racetracks, it's probably the biggest gamble, but having said that, the soft option to me is the only one to go.
So looking down into those very tight pits here at Monaco. Again, another unique aspect of this track is that you don't have a nice big pit lane and pit garages to work from. Here, everybody is compressed into a tiny amount of space. The teams are right on top of each other, really, in the pit lane. It's a huge opportunity for the teams to get a very close look at the opponent's machinery, but it's difficult working conditions for the mechanics, and a dangerous area too. So they have to be on their toes pretty much as the drivers have to be when they're on track, because the mechanics could very easily be hit by a car coming down this pit lane.
Yes, and indeed the Automobile Club de Monaco have announced that they will have a brand new pits complex, hold on guys, in 2006. And when you consider that every other circuit around the world, and think what's going on at Silverstone, for example, they're going to have a brand new complex for the 2003 Grand Prix, and we're seeing every circuit under pressure to upgrade their facilities. Monaco is going to do it for 2006, but bear in mind that a lot of this, I mean, this part of the circuit, Giancarlo Fisichella, this is virtually reclaimed land. The old racetrack used to run up behind. This is part of it that was reclaimed back in the late 60s, introduced in 73, and there will be further changes here. The existing pit lane, you can see how now it's one car width. It is the most appalling pit lane in the world, and it is so important to make sure that when you leave your pit wall or you leave your garage to walk across, look to the left.
Well, I'd say it's tight down there, but our guys are up and down pit lane as ever, getting all the stories, and Nick Damon caught up just a second ago with Ross Brawn.
Ross Brawn, I'm wondering whether I was alone in not being surprised at the event in Austria. It seemed to me a logical thing to do, but have you been surprised by the reaction of the press and the FIA?
Not the reaction of the press, to be honest. I mean, that's media make what they can, but we were surprised at the reaction of our fans, and that concerned us. You know, the Tifosi are part of Ferrari, and we were concerned about the reaction of our fans, and so I think we've had a long think about that, and we'll try and make sure in the future the fans understand what we're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve. But I hope they get over it, because we've been through some pretty difficult times with Ferrari, and they've always stayed with us, and I think that's just a little glitch, and I'm sure they'll continue to support us.
And do you think by the time the team faces the FIA before the British Grand Prix, this really will have blown over?
It's probably not. I don't really want to talk about the FIA case. I think we don't want to comment on that. It's something between the team and the FIA, and we'll see what happens. But obviously, I'm optimistic that sensible decisions will be made.
Now we come here to a unique track where you've last few years done very, very well, so the confidence must be sky high.
Well, one of the strange things was that what people couldn't understand about Austria is why did we need to do it, but we're always paranoid. We're always scared that something's going to go wrong. And so, yes, we come here with a very good car and two fantastic drivers, but we're always dead scared that something's going to go wrong. And so, and in a perverse way, to have assumed that we won the championship in Austria would have been very arrogant, and that's something we try not to be. So we have reasonable confidence, but not overconfident, and we went well here last year. It's a very good car, so really there's no reason why we shouldn't be challenging. But one little mistake here and the race is over, or qualifying spoiled, and it's all on a very fine edge. But I enjoy it here. It's a great challenge. I think the drivers enjoy it, so we'll make the best of it.
Best of luck, Ross. Thanks.
So Ross Brawn and of course Michael Schumacher winning here last year, taking his 5th victory around the streets of Monaco. The year before, however, mechanical problems did put him out, so Ross just explaining that. Now, Monaco is unique in terms of the challenge for the engineers as well as everything else, as we're just seeing a little trip for Frentzen through the chicane there. No problem, of course, in the early part of free practice. It's all about getting as much downforce from the cars as possible. And Peter, I think you've got some news for us. I know this weekend we can expect to see lots of little add-ons on the cars.
That's right, yes, Ben. All the engineers downforce as they possibly can on the cars here. This is one of the circuits where, in fact, tyre performance exceeds aerodynamic download. So as much as they can throw at the cars, they will. You can see this wing on the gearbox of the Toyota here. Alan McNish just about to leave the very garage which you've been describing. And that's not unusual, really. Up and down the pit lane, we see lots of little winglets like this. I don't know if we can just squeeze in between the mechanics here. They take the tyre covers off. Alan went out on his first lap, it should be noted, on intermediate tyres. Now he's on dry tyres, which is a good sign, although a few drops of rain just then, not too promising. But interesting to see how Toyota get on with these wings they have.
Yes, indeed, Peter, and I can see they've also put one on just behind the airbox, a bit like Jordan have been running. So quite a few little add-ons, and it's a bit of a sort of spot the extra wing here this morning, isn't it, John? Because most teams will try and add on extra pieces, and in fact Arrows and Jordan last year both tried adding extra wings on, which were fairly quickly banned by the FIA.
Well, I think that everybody's looking for any opportunity to look at the rules and say, well, it says you can't do this, but well, maybe we'll do something that we can find a way around a rule and regulation. Nevertheless, if you look at a Ferrari, you'll probably not see too many additions to that car, because basically they've got a very, very sound aerodynamic package. The big difference, of course, is that the majority of the corner speeds are very low speeds. They're probably taken in first, second, and in some occasions third gear. Quickest corner on the circuit, well, it's arguable. For me, it's probably Tabac. I mean, forget about going through the tunnel. It's just flat out, so the downforce there is at very high speed. But the majority of the corners are very, very low speeds. And even going through somewhere like the Casino, the Mazeney corner that leads into Casino corner, is not taking much more than about 85, 90 miles an hour. And the amount of downforce that you're generating at that speed is very much lower. Of course, aerodynamics are affected by the square of the speed, so therefore you've got to crank on as much. And I would call it dirty or inefficient downforce. It's like putting up a barn door on the back of the car just to try and lever the rear of the car down and generate as much overall downforce as you can.
Jacques Villeneuve on track then. We heard from him in that interview just a little earlier on in the programme. He's never had a victory nor a pole position here at Monaco, and in fact when he was driving for Williams it was the year 1997 when Frentzen took the pole position for the team, but the Williams team decided to start on slicks. It was a very wet track and it proved to be a big mistake. Well, in the past, of course, one of Williams' wins came through similar tactics. That was for Rosberg back in 1983. Funny thing is that Williams have only won twice around this Monaco track, in spite of having led it on many occasions. Jacques himself, though, has had some fighting drives and has finished in the points on a few occasions, coming through to get a couple of decent results from quite a long way down the grid. He was 5th here in 1998 from 13th on the grid, and 4th here last year from 9th on the grid.
Yes, getting points last year and almost getting on the podium, just one spot behind Eddie Irvine. Nevertheless, it's a racetrack that I think Jacques Villeneuve would probably feel, in terms of success, in other words winning, he's not really cracked this one. And when he came here in 96 initially, it was quite a bit of a wake-up call, having enjoyed pole position in his first Grand Prix in Australia, then coming to the very tight confines of this street track. Totally different discipline, and the way you attack the racetrack, you've just got to wait until the grip comes. If you try to go too quickly too soon, you will end up in trouble. Inevitably you'll end up making contact with the barrier or running wide, going down here, for example, down into Saint-Deveau. There is marginal runoff, and frequently you'll see people scooting straight on, because the choice of going straight on or turning right is only one choice. You've got to go straight on.
So Villeneuve, one of the few cars out there. Felipe Massa, Olivier Panis and Alan McNish are the others out there, as we look at Jenson Button in pit lane. But Peter, I think you've got something for us.
Yes, just walking up and down the pit lane, it's interesting to see here quite a lot of the chief designers, the Gavin Fishers of this world, the Neil Oatleys, the John Russells, who normally don't come to Grand Prix, all here at Monte Carlo. They may not be here all weekend, perhaps some of them might fly back tonight or tomorrow. But for some, I guess there's one very good reason why they're all here. It's because it's a very easy pit lane in which to look at the opposition. You can see what's going on with the front suspension of the McLaren. You can look at all sorts of details that you could never get at a normal Grand Prix. So interesting to see a nice turnout of the team designers.
Peter.
John, one interesting point, I think. Yes, sure.
Yeah, no, I was actually just going to come back to you on that, because I gather that Minardi have announced that they're making some people redundant, some 15 people, and I gather that George Wrighton is one of those. Now he's very senior on design staff there at Minardi, isn't he?
He is, yes, and I think that's a bit of a blow for Minardi. I don't quite know what's going on there. As I said a bit earlier in the season, I was shocked last year talking to Paul Stoddard about the possibility of his hiring Sergio Rinland, and he dismissed that and said, no, we don't need chief designers at Minardi. So, I don't know what really is going on there.
Well, Peter, I think I can maybe bring you up to date on this. We've seen this notice of 15 people losing their jobs, but also a number of people have been at the headquarters in the UK given, let's say, an extended holiday period, and indications that it is very, very tough for those teams at the bottom end of the grid. Financially, the sponsorship levels are not as healthy as they could be, and the outgoings, of course, never change. You've still got to spend the money. Minardi have brought 4 cars here this weekend.
forget, they've got free engines from Asiatech, so that shows how difficult it is to run a Formula One team. And one would imagine, given these financial constraints, that the Minardi-Asiatech marriage would be a lot closer than it is. But Asiatech, if you talk to the guys there, they get a lot of aggression from Minardi, and that I find very surprising as well, because you'd think at this point they'd be taking every free item they possibly can. But John, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the hairpins here. In your day, correct me if I'm wrong, going into the station hairpin or the Rascas hairpin was a question of putting one hand on top of the wheel and then bringing the wheel round steering wheels, of course. That's not possible with most of today's Grand Prix cars, because it's a very flat top on the steering wheel. And certainly in the case of Sauber, they've had to completely change their front suspension geometry for Monaco so they can get round the hairpin with just one fold of the arms. And to do that, they've had to put some geometry called Ackermann into the front. And because that also affects the feel of the car on fast corners, they've done some pre-race testing with this Ackermann geometry built in. And the drivers, of course, have to get used to the feel of the car on the fast corners through the swimming pool and the casino as much as they're going to enjoy just being able to get through the hairpin on one fold of the arms.
Yes, I mean, I remember Ackermann, good old friend of the McLaren team back in the late 70s. Didn't do much for the team at that time. Unfortunately, it was more an aerodynamic problem than a mechanical problem. But nevertheless, teams looked at every opportunity solution. But of course, again, the flat steering wheel as opposed to a round steering wheel. Our cars had different levels of grip, different levels of downforce, whichever. I mean, Sauber are doing something, no doubt, that will help them here, they hope. We'll wait and see on that one.
On board. That third place last year, the first podium for Jaguar. Looking at a bit of additional wing there on the front of the Williams. And we're just trying to listen into a bit of team radio there. So Juan Pablo Montoya now preparing to come out. You can see he's on the grooved dry weather tyres. So track conditions have improved sufficiently, and looking right into the front suspension, those barge boards and other aerodynamic bits and pieces around that front suspension of the Williams as he prepares to come out.
I'm looking at, I mean, I don't know whether those are new on the Williams, but certainly they look slightly different to those we have seen previously. and in effect trying to maybe replicate what some of the twin keel designs like the Sabre and the Arrows have done around the front of the car. Of course, a lot of teams may not choose to do their normal Friday morning work to the level that they would have done on a normal Grand Prix circuit. They may actually opt to run slightly lower fuel levels, because what they have to do, and bearing in mind the weather conditions here today, they've got to ensure that the competitiveness of their car for qualifying is right at that point. They may not have a dry Saturday morning, but a dry qualifying session, so they may well just abandon all concepts of doing the traditional Friday morning work.
Michael Schumacher gets ready to get into his car then, looking to match Ayrton Senna's 6 victories at Monaco this weekend, and indeed to try and take 150 wins for Ferrari. That's another milestone coming up for the Ferrari team, possibly here this weekend.
And also will be Michael's 100th Grand Prix in a Ferrari. And for everybody else who's interested in statistics, it could be Mika Salo's 100th Grand Prix in a Toyota this weekend.
100th Grand Prix overall, yes.
Only not in a Toyota, but driving a Toyota.
Only his 7th in a Toyota, of course, as we're watching Jenson Button. Now, Jenson, John, doesn't seem to think this is one of his favourite tracks. He finds it a little bit more, not so much, he finds it a challenge, but he doesn't really enjoy it perhaps quite as much as others. But it's having a car that works around here, and I think if he had a car that really worked well, he might find himself enjoying it more.
I think that's really the case of this racetrack. I've enjoyed pole positions and front row good positions, and I've also been at the back. I've also failed to qualify, and I can assure you, starting at the back of the grid at Monte Carlo, 78 laps, it is very, very tough. You get to 20 laps in the race, you think, well, when's the checkered flag coming out? I think Jenson enjoys Monte Carlo from different perspectives, particularly bobbing around in the harbour on his boat with half a dozen scantily clad babes on board. Adds to the pleasure and enjoyment, but he's not here to do that. He's here to drive a. But Mike Gascoigne, as the technical director of the Renault team, was very bullish. He believes that they can get into the top 6 in qualifying. They even believe they're in a position now to eclipse McLaren, who've got probably the best record, in fact 11 Grand Prix victories for that team around Monte Carlo. Now that's a tall order for Mike Gascoigne. He better fulfill it, or he will find himself the brunt of some jokes later in the paddock.
Yes, it's interesting to note their confidence, though, and I think looking at the performance of Renault this season, they are in very much better shape, and if the Michelin tyre is the one to have, then we could expect to see Renault running up front. So far this year, it's been Bridgestone, of course, virtually all the way. Out of the 6 races held so far, 5 have gone the way of Bridgestone, all with Ferrari. And 1 race only has gone to Michelin, and that was the Malaysian Grand Prix, courtesy of Ralf Schumacher. So the battle is still on.
Well, just looking down to see what's happening. In fact, it is Jenson Button who has gone quickest, but it's only temporarily because Ralf Schumacher right on his heels, and we're looking at Kimi Raikkonen enjoying his first visit to Monte Carlo in a McLaren, the most successful Grand Prix team in the history of this Grand Prix.
Yes, indeed, and of course, just last year, David Coulthard took pole position for this Grand Prix, and an excellent result that was for him, but it didn't work out in the race itself because the car stalled. We've got an accident.
De La Rosa, and there you are, an example of how easy it is, and that's going to be a delay to get that car over. That's a fairly heavy impact, and we're looking, I think, on the exit of Tabac. I think it was just around the swimming pool area. Difficult to see where it is precisely, but that is the Tabac swimming pool area. And Pedro de la Rosa climbs out. I mean, he puts the steering wheel back on in spite of the car being immovable. Well, there you say it was the exit of the swimming pool. Now, what went wrong for de la Rosa, we don't know, but certainly got it completely wrong on that exit of the swimming pool area. Clobbered the barrier heavily. That car is going to be, well, probably de la Rosa is going to miss. Let's look and see what happens. He comes out, well, he's just way off line altogether. Hits it at a very sharp angle, and
do you think he touched the inside there on the left, perhaps?
I'd like to see another angle. It's difficult to see why, because he certainly was coming out of the exit of the swimming pool at an angle which is not normal. Whether he had contact, whether he had maybe an oversteer in the right-hand part, and that was the consequence. He couldn't get the car back into control. But I would say for Pedro de la Rosa, sorry, sunshine, your running for Friday is over. And Pedro de la Rosa has only been out. That was his 7th lap. And an experienced driver gets it wrong like that, that's the price you pay.
And here at Monaco is a very costly price. If you lose any time on track, it really sets back the whole challenge for the weekend. We've seen it so many times in the past. People who have accidents early on over the weekend never get it back together for qualifying, particularly And remember, a lot of this Grand Prix is about qualifying well.
Well, the car craned away very quickly. The efficient Monagas Automobile Club, they got these cars, I mean, amazing. They've got these huge cranes all around the circuit. There you see, in fact, it's actually on the seaside of that part of track. But of course, the team will not have access to the car until this 1 hour session finishes. They're just some 25 minutes into that session. So Jaguar will not have a chance to get that car back. They will have an hour, or effectively the best part of 2 hours, because they'll have an hour of running as well, to hopefully get it repaired. But I think for Pedro de la Rosa and Jaguar, a setback they did not need.
So we still have somewhat cloudy skies overhead, but the track drying out in this first session of free practice from Monaco. It's Thursday free practice, they get a day off on Friday, and then they're all at it again on Saturday morning. Ralf Schumacher fastest currently from Jenson Button, Eddie Irvine, Olivier Panis, Trulli and Villeneuve.
Well, I know it's all very early days, but right now we're seeing a Michelin top four. Now Michelin clearly for this race, probably even more than for the French Grand Prix, the home Grand Prix for Michelin, want to win in Monte Carlo. And I'm quite certain that they've done something quite special. We're seeing in conditions which traditionally do not favour Michelin, top four by Michelin teams: Ralf, Schumacher, Williams, Button, Renault, Raikkonen for McLaren and Irvine for Jaguar. Michael Schumacher for the first time leaves the pit lane as David Coulthard comes round the back. This is the area where you start to enter the swimming pool. Very quick left, right, then you've got to get the car slowed down. It may be here that it all went wrong for De La Rosa. There's the proper exit out of the swimming pool. Coulthard on course to be fastest man on track, fastest in first and second sectors, and we wait now for this final third sector to come up.
Well, if McLaren are going to have a chance in this early part of the season, it's got to be here, surely at Monaco, because engine power is not so critical. Indeed, David does go fastest by quite a margin, 1.1 seconds faster than Kimi Raikkonen. Now, in fact, has just popped up, so only 4/10 between them, as Raikkonen following David Coulthard around, and the two of them are quite well ahead of Ralf Schumacher. But this could be a weekend for McLaren Mercedes. There is Pedro de la Rosa, looking somewhat frustrated. A mistake, we think. We don't quite see the beginning of that accident, but whatever caused it, that is bad news indeed for de la Rosa.
Ben, I think just the way he's talking to Nav Sadar, the press officer in Jaguar, he, I think, clipped the curb or the barrier on the exit of the swimming pool, which threw him offline and basically straight into the barrier as he was making his way down to Rascasse.
On board, here we are with David Coulthard, down towards the chicane, dropping downhill, and now through this tricky little chicane and accelerating towards the left-hander at Tabak. Now, Coulthard does love this place. As I said, he had pole position, looked set to challenge Michael until that problem getting off the grid. Won the race the year previously. A great drive. Michael Schumacher did have a problem in that race, but Coulthard was there, ready to pick up the pieces and come through to take the win. He lives in Monaco. He owns a hotel here now, and he looks fired up for a good weekend right out to the curb there.
But Kimi Raikkonen's just lost it at Rascasse. He was quickest in the first sector, second sector. Now the young McLaren driver stuck it into the wall. He lost it coming through the right-hand part. Juan Pablo Montoya's locked it up down into Mirabeau as one of the Jordans comes down as well. That's Takuma Sato, and well, he's hurt his wrist, his right wrist. He's shaking it now. Is that an injury or is it just a tweak? Well, Dennis and Adrian Newey look as they sit against this. Well, you see Michael Schumacher watch as he comes down.
This is Montoya, I think we're looking at.
Mirabeau, yes.
Montoya into Mirabeau, just locking up. Did he go down the escape road bit? He locked up. Oh, and he didn't quite. Oh, yes, he did. He did have to go down the escape road just a little bit. No major problem for him. No damage done. The tyre's still cold. Now this is what happened to Raikkonen.
Yeah, he came round that little left-hander into Rascasse. He was very quick. He clipped the barrier, but worst of all, he then caught the end of the Armco barrier, and that would have given a whiplash on the steering wheel, which is why his right hand, he was shaking it. There's a bone in your wrist called the scaphoid bone. It is a very small bone. It is a crucial bone to the articulation of your wrist. It is easily damaged. Now let's hope that there is no damage to Kimi Raikkonen, and that was just a tweak and a strain rather than something more serious. But again, quite heavy damage to the front and rear of Raikkonen's McLaren, as we see Michael Schumacher continuing, of course, part of the racetrack under yellow flags. He's just going through an out lap and just doing a check on the car on the parts of the track where the yellow flag is not in place. But this may well be a situation where we have an entire yellow flag situation around the racetrack to ensure that drivers are aware that there's a major incident down at Rascasse, which is actually the furthest point from this part of the track we see Michael Schumacher going round. McLaren, fortunately, been being pushed back into the paddock, so McLaren will be able to take that car back to their motorhome, not the motorhome, but to the transporter and the mobile workshops. They will start working that car, I would think, pretty much immediately.
Well, that's good news for the team, but it's bad news indeed that Kimi Raikkonen has damaged it already in the early stages of morning free practice here on Thursday. And well, David Coulthard is fastest. Raikkonen still second fastest with the time he had done just before that lap. But that's a big mistake to make. It's a sort of rookie mistake to go out in the early laps here on a Thursday morning. But you can recover from that. It's Saturday and qualifying that will be so crucial.
I think that it might be described as a little bit of false confidence. He knew he was quickest in that first sector. He would have known he had a personal best in the sector. He was clearly pushing to try and eclipse his teammate David Coulthard, who was currently and remains in fact quickest of all. We have to see what Michael Schumacher is going to do as he comes across to compete. This is his first, I think, clear flying lap. And Michael Schumacher pops in a fourth quickest time again, fastest of the Bridgestone runners. So Raikkonen maybe just overconfidence and too high an expectation, and there's the price you pay.
So let's just enjoy this view a moment, riding with the world champion, and he's wearing one of those clear visors again, so we can almost see his eyes, although from this angle we can't see it quite as clearly as from the front-mounted camera, but you can really see the amount of work that goes on. And look at where he's looking, look at his eyes and how early he's looking through the corners around the hairpin, particularly here at Monaco.
And also the angle of the driver's body to relation to the steering wheel. This sort of idea of a straight arm driving position, that is history. Oh, Michael gets very wide going through the tunnel. You've got to have a very good angle between your forearm and your upper arm to ensure you've got leverage. Even with power steering, the loads are so high. You see how close his body is to the steering wheel? That sometimes is actually not the most comfortable position to drive in, but it's the most efficient position to drive in.
So now let's watch him through the swimming pool area of the track. A little higher speed through here than some parts. Now into Rascasse. Having to really wait there. It's very slow through the first right-hander. Now this is the last corner that brings him back onto the start-finish area, which is a long, curving right-hander, effectively. And this will bring him back across the line. He stays fourth fastest on a 1:23.6, as you can see, and that's just over a second slower. Work continues on Juan Pablo Montoya's. Williams in pit lane. Just catching a little bit of Montoya speaking, but not very much on this occasion. Only the second time that he's been to Monaco. Last year he messed it up, he crashed in the early laps, made a mistake, put it into the Armco barrier, and discovered that driving at Monaco is not as straightforward as it might seem. There are so many unpredictable aspects. It's a bumpy track, a lot of manhole covers, all sorts of things to deal with, as Kimi found out just a moment ago, crashing his McLaren Mercedes and giving the team plenty to think about.
Of course, Juan Pablo Montoya did race in Formula 3000 like many of his fellow competitors here this weekend, but a different car, different level of performance, grip levels, braking performance, and you know, it is a place you come to and you either immediately fall in love with and get on with, or it is a real hate relationship. It is very much proportional to your performance, of course. And Jenson Button currently sixth quickest, but improving personally, some tenth of a second away from the best we've seen so far. That was Kimi Raikkonen. That time in that first sector still stands, but Button looking more confident as he goes out now to complete his ninth lap.
So let's just watch him through this latter part of the lap, through the left-hander at the back, and sitting so low as you do in a Formula 1 car, just imagine for a moment, you can see he can't see over those barriers at all. His head height, the helmet height, below those layers of Armco, so the view that we get is really quite different to the view the driver has within the cockpit. Mostly all he can see is steel barrier lining the whole way around this track.
Well, that looked a fairly neutral handling car coming through the final turn. Jenson Button goes up to third quickest. You could just see the back end drifting out. And Jenson continues on and looks to make further progress. But Olivier Panis, we have not seen much of the VAR or of Olivier Panis. Currently now second quickest, fastest of the Bridgestone runners, clearly on a low fuel load, as we were indicating earlier in the broadcast.
Jarno Trulli, Button's teammate, waits patiently in pits at the moment. Hasn't scored any points so far this year, remember. It's really been a very disappointing season for him. All of Renault's points have been scored by Jenson Button, and maybe it's about time the luck changed for him. We're now riding on board with Mika Salo, one of the most consistent drivers here at Monaco over the years. He's been in the points 4 occasions from 6 starts. And at the moment, Mika Salo is 14th fastest.
Yes, but teammate McNish, and sort of, I almost call him a virgin here in Monaco, he's actually in 10th place, so Alan's just gone out, he's just run lap after lap after lap. He's on the 16th lap right now, and he's 10th quickest, so Alan doing a very mature, sensible job for Toyota team.
So let's just watch Salo for a little longer, coming through Saint-Devote now, climbing up this steep hill, where the engine works hard. Although they're only on full throttle for about 38% of the lap. It's one of the least amount of full throttle tracks, really, of any on the calendar. It's, as we mentioned earlier, it's not all about big horsepower here. There's Davy Ryan of McLaren Mercedes, and it looks as though he's trying to make some plans already as to what parts they need, the system they'll need to go through to get that car of Raikkonen's repaired.
Well, I think he's going up to see the race control and maybe to find out a little bit more about that incident with Kimi Raikkonen. We haven't seen Raikkonen in the pit since that incident, and whether he's got a problem with that wrist. We saw him shaking it as he got out of the car, and maybe just nothing more than a sprain or a sharp rat on the wrist, or whether it's something more serious. Hopefully it is only something very minor.
Ralf Schumacher on track as we watch Giancarlo Fisichella. Fisichella, one of the around this track over the years. 4 times he's finished in the points himself in some 6 races, and one of his best ever results in any Grand Prix. Second here in 1998, having qualified in 3rd position. So that was a brilliant performance when he was driving for Benetton. Consistently quick here, Fisichella, one to watch, particularly in qualifying. Now we're on board with Ralf Schumacher into the tunnel. Look at the light change, and of course the Grand Prix driver's eyes having to adapt very quickly to that change in light. At least it's not quite so bright, as you can see, the past conditions not making that transition quite as great as normal.
So I think that the camera lens is actually slightly distorting the level of light in the tunnel. The light in the tunnel today is balanced to the light outside, so in fact for the driver there is no difference in terms of the light, the level of light, but the camera of course has to react, and if it stayed with Ralph through the tunnel, no doubt we'd have seen not the focus, but the aperture on the camera lens adapt to the level of light. Just it would have taken maybe another couple of seconds.
So Ralf Schumacher chasing around at the moment just to see how the car feels, get a bit more of a handle on it. Jarno Trulli is the Renault that's just ahead of him as they climb back up the hill, and there's a great view. This barrier quite often gets clipped on the outside of Saint-Devote.
It certainly does. I mean, when you get a rattle in that barrier, you know about it, you're not going to go much further. Ralf Schumacher backs off. He's decided that he doesn't want to get too close to Jarno Trulli, or he feels that he's done sufficient runs or laps on this particular run. Ralf on his 12th lap, and Jarno Trulli on his 12th lap as well.
So let's just watch Trulli down to the lower part of the track now, towards the seafront. He's just coming around to the seas just on his left now as he comes through the tunnel, and then of course building up to about 170, 180 miles an hour through here, and then plunging downhill even further into chicane. It's quite steep downhill into here, and the back brakes can lock up quite easily and get the car out of shape.
I've watched both Button and now watching Jarno Trulli, and Renault do seem to have got a car the driver can handle, can really get stuck in, and you use the throttle, turn the wheel with confidence. And right now the balance of the two Renaults is pretty impressive. Button's 3rd quickest, and watching Jarno Trulli personal bests in 1st and 2nd sectors. We'd expect to see Jarno Trulli move up from 8th place, probably somewhere around about 5th, 4th, 5th or 6th.
So let's take a look at what time it is as he comes across. 2nd, in fact. He goes even faster. He goes 2nd fastest, and he's only a few hundredths slower than David Coulthard's time set a little earlier on. Dave Ryan makes his way back from the control tower. Kimi Raikkonen is now apparently in pit lane. Yes,
he's sitting on the pit wall, and he's got a nice big bag of frozen peas, or basically an ice pack, but frozen peas do the same thing, to take away any swelling, any inflammation. We saw him getting out of his car after that fairly severe impact there. Is the young Finn, and well, the right wrist, there's nothing on it right now, so maybe the concern that we were expecting was over-concern. Hopefully that was the case. Nevertheless, any rattle off the barriers around here, if you're holding onto the steering wheel, and you do hold onto it fairly firmly, you will get a whiplash effect, and it can do quite a lot of damage to the tendons and to the soft tissue in your wrist.
On board here with Eddie Irvine, having seen De La Rosa crash earlier on in this session, the only Jaguar remaining in this free practice. For the moment, Juan Pablo Montoya heads on around as we watch Irvine come into his pit area here, and you can see the teams just crammed in together in this tight pit lane. Jarno Trulli still going well here. This is a good lap coming up from Jarno Trulli. He was personal best through the first sector. This could be an overall improvement. Will he beat Coulthard's time? Not quite, 0.2 of a second slower.
He would have done, in fact, because Rubens Barrichello was that Ferrari creeping around the Rascasse corner to go into the pits, and I'm quite certain that Jarno Trulli would have probably improved on David Coulthard's 22.512, as Trulli is about, well, 0.04 of a second away, and clearly that time was more than lost, as Rubens was somewhat daydreaming as he made his way back into the pits.
30 years old, Rubens Barrichello today, so celebrating a birthday. Not celebrating perhaps quite so much what could have been victory in Austria if things had gone slightly differently, but getting on with a very professional job and applying himself here to the work in hand in free practice. Ralf Schumacher hasn't got a great record here at Monaco over the years. He's only had well, he hasn't had any finishes. In fact, in 5 starts he hasn't managed to make it to the end of any of his Grand Prix in Monaco.
Well, and Pablo Montoya, personal best in first sector, well, nothing outstanding in the second sector, currently in 10th place. So Montoya quite cautiously exits out of that very tight corner that leads on to start-finish straight, and 124.7, 2.2 seconds slower than David Coulthard. Clearly Montoya with a substantial amount of fuel on board, and that's once again, oh well, that's Alex Young, all that experience of driving here last weekend in the historic Grand Prix. At least he kept them off the barriers, unlike Kimi Raikkonen, who slammed into it very heavily in his McLaren. Felipe Massa also very quick at the minute too.
Yeah, one to watch as well, isn't he? Because Massa has very little experience of this track. We've watched him all season long, particularly on the first and second days of the free practice. He's always very dramatic, not always faster than his teammate when it comes to qualifying, but always absolutely flat out, and you can watch him here as he begins to get a little more to grips with this Monaco circuit.
Especially 7-8, also on 14. I think the graining is still there. He was only for 5 millimeters, so still a number of laps to go, I think.
So Massa just
he's not braking in the tunnel like before. He saw something on the Combe, I think. Okay.
Well, our radio team talking about tons of understeer. We can certainly see Felipe Massa has got a lot of understeer in the entry into some of these corners, as he now makes his way out through Saint-Deveau. Felipe Massa, well, he improved a little bit up to 15th place, but David Coulthard still fastest, and now fastest in that first sector, coming through second sector to see again fastest of all. So finally somebody has eclipsed what Kimi Raikkonen did before he had a shunt, and David Coulthard's that man.
Well, the track's cleaning up all the time, of course, and this track, which as you mentioned earlier, John, is so dirty from its use as normal roads and from that historic meeting here last weekend, now beginning to clean up a little bit. Time's getting quicker. Here goes David Coulthard, and he goes a full second, or over a second faster than his previous best time. So Coulthard looking very, very quick once again. A 121.388, and in fact that's faster than the Thursday free practice time from last year. So already we're seeing improvements as Olivier Panis makes his way through the tunnel. Panis currently in 4th, and we're looking at Raikkonen in the pits on the McLaren counter. He looks okay and fairly relaxed at the moment as he watches what everyone else is up to.
I think he's thoroughly angry with himself for making a very fundamental error. David Coulthard clearly right now got a car which he can drive. Pole position setter from last year's Grand Prix, of course, left in the grid, and all that launch control controversy. And Raikkonen thinking, well, can I get my car back out on this track for this second 1 hour session, or am I going to have to wait until Saturday morning and tried to piggyback on all the work that Coulthard's done for the team. It's a big situation for Raikkonen, and one that he will be very, very disappointed in.
Talking of McLaren, John, Mika Hakkinen is here at Monaco this weekend. Held a little press conference this morning, but really didn't say whether he's going to be coming back to Grand Prix racing or not. He said decision's not made. He's thoroughly enjoying time off, spending time with his family, seeing friends, enjoying his boat as well. Hasn't yet made a decision, but he says that McLaren have said they will provide a car if he decides to come back to Grand Prix racing.
Well, interesting if he does that, who would they actually dispose of?
Good point, but we'll have to wait and see whether Mika in fact does return. Looking very happy at the moment in his sabbatical year. We'll find out soon, no doubt. Peter, what do you reckon on the McLaren's performance at the moment? David Coulthard's certainly going quickly, isn't he?
He's going very well indeed, Ben, yes. And I've got a bit of a theory. I wonder whether you guys might agree with this or not. But I think one of the problems McLaren have had all year is how pitch sensitive their car is, particularly on high downforce circuits where there are fast corners. They seem to have very snappy rear, they just cannot get the aero balance. But here, where most of the cars are running a little bit higher than normal, a little bit softer than normal, it's all about mechanical grip, it's about tyre performance, and it's about just driving the racing car. I think that problem has been taken away from McLaren. All of a sudden, I think their baseline is a lot more comparable with that of, say, Williams and, dare I say it, Ferrari.
Good point, Peter. And what about on the power side? Do you think that the engine-wise, they do seem to have been lacking a bit this year? That presumably won't show up so much here.
Yeah, well, I'm one of the guys. I don't know why it is, but I don't actually agree with that. I think a lot of people have been saying the Ilmore Mercedes is 60 horsepower down. I find it very hard to believe that it's been that much from the start of the year, bearing in mind how quick, for example, Mika Hakkinen was in the US Grand Prix last year. I just don't believe they lost that much ground over the winter. Maybe 10, maybe 15 horsepower, but 60, hard to believe.
Well, we'll certainly keep an eye on Coulthard. He's still going around at the moment. He's completed 11 laps, but we're looking at Japanese driver Takuma Sato currently. And Sato, as we heard, crashed the Lotus 49 that he was driving here last weekend in damp and greasy conditions. He only did a few laps and unfortunately went off. But as Sato continues round, I think we can hear from his teammate Giancarlo Fisichella, who hasn't been out so much yet.
Giancarlo Fisichella, you're out of your car. What's the problem?
We had a problem on the gearbox, maybe something like a mechanical problem, but the car is already fixed. But because we had a problem at the circuit and the marshal pushed me in the pit lane, he's not allowed to get in again now. So next session.
Then basically what he's trying to say is that he had outside assistance. His car was pushed by a marshal. That is not permitted, and he has to sit out the remaining part of this session. And again, for Jordan, like McLaren and Jaguar, losing one car for reasons, in this instance was because of external assistance, is a great loss to the team. And with the inexperience of Takuma Sato in this circuit, coming back from a massive Grand Prix shunt in Austria, having shunted in a Lotus 49 here as well, well, I mean, Jordan are going to have to wait until they start the second 1 hour session before they get any really meaningful information or feedback coming from Giancarlo.
Someone who is
for the pit board, please.
Started at the back after stalling on the formation lap. Enrique was perfectly within his rights to drive as hard as he could and try and let David find a way past, and David couldn't until Enrique made his pit stop on lap 43, I think it was. So it was a long time that Coulthard was stuck behind him.
And I think Enrique Benoldi really, in a sense, came of age here last year. Not so much because of his drive, but because of the way he had to deal with the verbal abuse that he was the victim of from team principals and motorsport directors, and I think that that was rather shameful on their part, as Benoldi was doing his job, and unfortunately for David Coulthard, getting trapped behind him. David wasn't prepared to stick his neck out and take a chance, and the consequence was he had to sit behind him basically until he got into the pit stop zone.
Arrows have managed to get a bit of testing in the intervening period between Austria and here. They've been both at Paul Ricard, which isn't too far away in the south of France, and they've been doing some straight line testing in the UK. Bit of work going on David Coulthard around that front suspension, those front barge board areas, the aerodynamics being adjusted, as we now take a look at Michael Schumacher on track. Currently Michael is down in 9th position, but he's only done 9 laps so far, so now he's putting together a run, and as you can see, he's up on pace.
Well, this is the first time Michael Schumacher really beginning to feel the bite from those Bridgestone tyres again, having to take full lock to get round the hairpin bend. That's down at the Louvre Hotel. You can also see the first signs of rubber being laid, and expect to see this part of racetrack by the end of the Grand Prix to be absolutely black as opposed to a shade of grey, which it currently is.
Down into the chicane then, trying not to straight line this area. Good and tidy through the first part, and let's see how quickly he's going as he comes through to back towards the swimming pool area. This is the second split coming up, and we're going to see, yes, he is faster than Coulthard, so it looks as though Michael Schumacher and Ferrari is going to take top time here with just about 7 minutes of the first session to go.
And Rubens Barrichello was ahead of him. Obviously was made aware by the team that Michael was catching up. He got out of the way. So Michael Schumacher looking to put his Ferrari for the first time fastest this morning. And he does, 1:21.094.
21.094, but only just under 0.3 of a second faster than Coulthard. The track is cleaning up, getting quicker all the time, so it's not by quite the same margin as perhaps we have seen on occasions this year. No doubt he'll still be putting in some more quickish laps as he continues round. Up ahead of him, Alan McNish, not far ahead in the Toyota.
Well, he's already over a 1/10 of a second up on his current fastest lap. And if you think to what qualifying pole time was last year, David Coulthard on Saturday afternoon 1:17.430, we're now at a 1:21.0. By the time this session ends, anticipated time being maybe in a high 1:19. Now that is not normal in Monte Carlo to be so close to a pole time on Friday morning, or even at the end of Friday's running. It takes time for this track to clean up. One of the two arrows decides it's safer to go across the chicane, and that was Benoldi.
So Enrique Benoldi gets back on again, as he should do, but it is reported to the race control. Of course, in free practice it doesn't matter too much, but you can get into trouble in the race if you gain an advantage through it. And if you do, then it's sensible to drop back behind the car you passed.
Well, Michael Schumacher, but he's looking, I think, for clear air, clear space on the track. This is the other major problem of this racetrack, is to clear air, to find a part of racetrack where there is no traffic. Now Michael's slow, he picks up the throttle, drives the car on the start-finish line, and he's got Jenson Button right behind him. Button will not be happy with that, because it will mean that if Button wants to continue another lap, he will probably be slightly impeded, but nonetheless Button's sixth quickest after some 15 laps.
Pedro de la Rosa only completed 6 laps before crashing on the exit of the swimming pool. Now, here you go, on board with Rubens Barrichello, heading down towards Mirabeau, now down towards one of the tightest corners, the left-hand hairpin. Look at the amount of lock that has to be applied to get around that one.
That's full lock, you can't get any more than that. Look at even the understeer through the first part of the Portier, watch through the second part. Clearly the Bridgestone tyre, you see that feathering on the left front, the way the tyre's shaving the rubber from outside to inside. That indicates that the compound's very soft, it indicates that the track is still not very clean, and basically it means that Rubens has got quite a lot of understeer to deal with, and he's having to stay off the throttle until he can feel the bite from that left front corner.
Now watch him through the chicane, or through the swimming pool area. This is faster through here. This is where we saw De La Rosa go off earlier on this morning. And now through Raskas. Very slow here. Again, piles on the lock. Waits to be able to put on the power.
And Ben, look at that left front. You can really see clearly how much graining that Rubens Barrichello is getting on that left front. Now, we saw back in Austria the Michelin runners, particularly in Montoya and on the two Williams, how much they were getting with their Michelin tire. Now it appears that at Monaco the problems afflicting Bridgestone and Ferrari.
Jarno Trulli looking like he may well improve on this lap. He's currently third fastest behind the Ferrari of Schumacher and the McLaren of David Coulthard, but this could put him ahead. Niki Lauda, a former winner of this race, of course, himself, just chatting with Pedro de la Rosa. Doesn't seem to be too upset that he's out of action. Here goes Trulli, stays third fastest by just a little bit from David Coulthard. In fact, it's still quite a lot. There's about a second between Coulthard and Trulli.
Yes, as David Coulthard comes back out on track, and watching Niki Lauda just putting a reassuring hand on Pedro de la Rosa's shoulder, saying, "Don't worry about it, chap. It's not a problem. Oh, by the way, the bill will be deducted from your salary before the next race." Dennis last week discussed this and said, really, we're looking forward to 2003 because we've got to make our commitments now to that season, and we'll do the best we can. We'll upgrade wherever possible. But somebody who's doing a good job upgrading is Heinz-Harald Frentzen and his Arrows. They were the stars, I thought, in Austria up until the race. Frentzen fourth quickest, and a little trip across the chicane. And Montoya is going to do the same thing. Just so easy to outbrake yourself. You think you can brake that little bit later on the entry into the chicane, and of course it results in an outbraking manoeuvre and a trip across the chicane.
There is Frentzen, John, you were talking about him. Fourth fastest now overall. Good effort that. So it's Schumacher, Coulthard, Trulli, then this man Frentzen ahead of Barrichello, then Panis Button. Raikkonen still with the 8th fastest time, despite only doing 6 laps in this session today. Ralf Schumacher 9th, Villeneuve 10th ahead of McNish, Massa, Sarlo, Webber. That's a good effort. Mark Webber 14th fastest currently in the Minardi.
And Frentzen looks like he's about to come into the pits. He comes up to that second sector time, and it's well, he's coming into the pits, or he's looking for a clear bit of track, but he's got plenty of clear space ahead of him. So it's a trip into the pits for Frentzen, who's just gone 4th quickest for Arrow's team. Very disappointed. Well, he's not, he decided. I mean, he had clear space, so maybe just consolidating, thinking about it. Where can I improve? Once again, starts off this process, get into Sandebo cleanly. Good exit, good drive out of that tight second gear corner, then the run all the way up through Beau-Rivage, Maisonneuve, then into the Casino Square.
Michael Schumacher out of the car. That'll be it for the session for him. The checkered flag is about to come out, as you can see from the countdown at the top of the screen. And well, as ever in Monaco, every session there's usually some drama or other, and we've seen a couple of incidents this morning. Checkered flag is out. We've seen accidents for Kimi Raikkonen and Pedro de la Rosa that denied them the opportunity to get back out. Fisichella missed laps after receiving some outside assistance. But once again, it's Michael Schumacher who has topped the timesheets. Barrichello comes through, ends up fourth fastest, so just displacing Frentzen on his final lap there. Frentzen pushed back down to 5th, Villeneuve improved to 6th, ahead of Panis, with both BARs going well there, 6th and 7th at the end of that session. Frentzen is still on a lap though.
Frentzen has personal best in first sector, comes through the second, it's a personal best again. So let's watch and see as we go back to watching Williams come through. When Pablo Montoya comes up to complete his lap. Montoya further down the field in 16th place, personal best for him, first sector, but really it's Frentzen the man who ought to watch.
Being asked to cool his brakes. Let's see what Frentzen does as he comes across. He was 5th, he stays 5th by just a fraction, still not matching Rubens Barrichello's time, but a good competitive performance from the Arrows team once again, and let's hope they can extend that into the race itself on Sunday.
And a good way for a team to finish the session on a high. Frentzen and Arrows in 5th place. Slightly further down, well, a long way further down in fact, his teammate Bernoldi, who did 21 laps but did a 25.4, indicating that maybe Arrows split the running between Frentzen on a light load and Bernoldi on a heavier load of fuel, bearing in mind that weather conditions aren't quite as stable today as we have been hoping for, where the forecast for Saturday and Sunday looks better. Nevertheless, a good thing, a good team decision to split the workload, to get information in a low fuel setup, and then send out the other car with more fuel on board to get some information for what will happen come Sunday's 78-lap Grand Prix.
So everyone has had a chance to blow away the cobwebs a little bit. Rubens Barrichello steps out. The least number of laps was done by Giancarlo Fisichella, and that was because he received that outside assistance. De La Rosa and Raikkonen both crashed. They only did 6 laps, but everyone else putting in a decent number of laps in this morning's free practice. Michael Schumacher only needing 13 laps to set the fastest time so far. Looks as though the Williams, as normal on a early first day, normally it would be a Friday, it's a Thursday here at Monaco. Looks as though they're running the cars relatively heavy, with Ralph down in 10th place and Juan Pablo Montoya in 16th. But just a quick note once again, Mark Webber ended up that session in 15th place, and that's a good effort for the Minardi driver, a 24.110, putting him ahead of people like Heidfeld, Bernoldi, Young, his teammate of course, and 1 or 2 people who had problems. So there we are, looking at the times from this morning's free practice. The Michelin's getting up amongst the Bridgestones this time. Normally on the first session we see it's all the red Bs, indicating dominance for Bridgestone, but it's slightly different this time, and it's both a McLaren and a Renault that have got up there amongst the Bridgestone users. But both BAR Hondas running well in 6th and 7th. Then Button, Raikkonen with the time that was only set within 6 laps. So Raikkonen, of course, could have gone very much faster than that, but has to settle with 9th. Ralf Schumacher down in 10th place at the end of that first run. Irvine, 11th, ahead of McNish. Good effort for McNish learning the track. Then Massa, Salo, and good to see that a couple of those new boys, John, people like Felipe Massa and Takuma Sato, didn't put a wheel wrong and stick it in the barrier, which could have been expected.
Well, I think in the case of Sato, I think he was under strict orders from the team to stay probably a foot minimum away from the barriers in any particular part of the racetrack. And of course for Felipe Massa, whose confidence is very much higher, he went out and drove but did a sensible job and didn't make any errors, finished up 13th. And Nick Heidfeld, his teammate, was done in 18th. So again, maybe team sending out Massa with a lower fuel load on board just to get a feel for the car in maybe a more normal trim, whereas Heidfeld would do a bit more of the teamwork for the Grand Prix.
So Frentzen pretty happy with his performance. Let's take a look back over the highlights from Monaco first free practice.